up, guys? Welcome back to Streetball Strategies. So for the past year, 2020, the year of COVID, there hasn't really been any real competition. No real head-to-head, one-on-one, two-on-two, that kind of competition. But for the last 6 months or so that I've been out here, I will say that I've probably played about 20 or so games of horse against about a handful of opponents. Since that's been my only competition, I kind of have found myself in those games of horse focusing and concentrating and kind of dialing in how to be successful, and I am happy to say that I have yet to lose any of those games of horse, but I'm not bragging about having done that. There were plenty of games, plenty of opponents where I had expected to lose, if for anything the fact that I am rusty, not having actively competed in the last 10 years, and so even games such as horse, I wouldn't be surprised if I didn't perform well and I ended up losing. But because I found myself taking those games seriously, what I noticed that I was doing subconsciously was elevating and sort of renewing my level of court awareness and using that court awareness to help me be successful in those games of horse. So I thought today we would talk about using court awareness to win games of horse. Windy out here today. So in the future I'm going to make a full video, at least a full video on court awareness, because it's a super important subject and it can give you a very strong advantage out here if you do it right. Your court awareness should start as soon as you come within sight of the park. As soon as you can see anyone out on the park, friend or foe or stranger or whoever, as soon as you see them, you start studying them, you start watching them, you start evaluating them to see what kind of players they are. Do they have any weaknesses? Do they have any tendencies? Anything that's going to give you an advantage in terms of how they play. As soon as you see them, you start studying that. You don't have to stare at them, you don't have to make it overt or clear that you're watching them and trying to study them, but just as you come out here and start being aware of the players that are on the court, you'll start to learn how to watch them and evaluate them without kind of staring at them and letting them know you're trying to get an advantage on them. But it's important that as soon as you see them, whether you're coming to the court and they're already there, or you're on the court and they're showing up, that you start studying them as soon as possible. So let me give you guys some examples of how I was successful out here playing these games of horse. There was this guy who showed up to the court. I was finishing up shooting a video, actually. He shows up, he's probably early 30s. He's got a kid with him, the kid's probably about 6. They come out here, they're shooting around. And I put my stuff away. I go back out to the court, start shooting some free throws just to cool down. And the guy comes up to me maybe within 5 minutes and says, "Do you want to play a game of horse?" So of course I want to play. Before we even start playing the game, I have already been studying him. I've already been evaluating him. I've had my court awareness of him being out here, how he's playing, what kind of game he has, how he moves. And I've done all that without even really watching him, just sort of glancing at him and his direction. Before we even start shooting, I know that this guy is there's something weird about how he favors his right hand. It would be wrong to say that he didn't have a left hand, because he's in his early 30s probably, and so at that point in time in his progression in his career, he probably is aware enough to know that he needs to have a left hand if he's going to be successful out here. So I'm sure he has some kind of a left hand. I'm sure he can go to his left in some capacity, but there was something about the way he moved, something about his balance, something about his overall movement that told me, even though he could go to the left, he's probably not that comfortable. He kind of favored going to the right. And so before we even start shooting, I am aware of this. I know this. And so we start playing, and as we're shooting, I'm noticing him favoring moving to the right, favoring his right side. I myself am pretty ambidextrous. I write and throw with my right hand, but when it comes to basketball, I'm pretty ambidextrous, and I'm pretty comfortable with either hand doing pretty much anything. And so I start shooting shots here and there, favoring my left hand and favoring moving to the left. And as I'm doing that, I'm seeing it more and more clearly that he's not comfortable with the left side of his body for whatever reason. He's just not comfortable moving and dealing with his left side. Knowing that, being aware of that, and then sort of exploiting that progressively throughout the games we were playing, I was able to win those games and be successful just by being aware that he had a weakness, and then I was able to use it against him. Another example of how I was able to be successful using court awareness to win a horse game is that another guy who's a kid, a teenager, probably easily half my age, and the way I would describe him is bouncy. This kid had a lot of energy, and the way he liked to express it was by jumping a lot, doing a lot of layups and stuff like that. So he asked me if I wanted to play a game. I said yeah. He said horse. I said yeah. So we start playing, and again, before we even start shooting, my awareness of him told me that number one, he's young, and number two, he's got a lot of energy, which I guess goes hand in hand. But I used that awareness to then profile him. I intentionally profiled him. And what I thought was that, okay, this kid is young, which means it's a good thing we're not playing straight up, because he would probably leave me in his dust. And so any kind of layup moves are probably out the window. They probably wouldn't serve me at all to try to shoot any kind of fancy layup moves against a young kid with lots of energy and fresh legs. And also because he's young, he's probably in love with the three-point shot. And he was shooting a lot of three-pointers. And so if I would have tried to shoot three-pointers against him, that's no advantage for me either. So I profiled him as being young and having a lot of energy and probably not being very sound fundamentally, at least yet in his career. And so I pretty much stuck to shooting mid-range shots. This kid was really good at doing all kinds of fancy layups. He had really good, he had deep three-point range. And it was a struggle for me to keep up with him deep behind the three-point line. But I was able to maintain enough of a lead by just shooting mid-range jumpers, just within the perimeter. I was able to use those just enough to get a few wins against him doing that. It's not all I did, but I varied it up enough so that I used mid-range jump shots enough to keep me ahead of him and to keep me winning in the games. And so I used my court awareness of him to tell me what his weakness was, to tell me what his strengths were as well, and then for me to sort of go in the opposite direction of what his strength was. And usually by doing that, by going in sort of the opposite direction of what your opponent's glaring strength is, you can then usually find his weakness and hopefully you're able to exploit it. The last example I'll give you guys is kind of the inversion of the last example, which is, again, I'm out here, the guy shows up, and it is clear to me, even as he's walking up to the court and I notice him, it's clear to me that he is fundamentally sound. This guy is all about fundamentals. If you told me his dad was like a coach of high school or college or something, I would completely believe you, because this guy, it was clear that he had fundamentals drilled into his game, and he was all about being fundamentally sound and good on the court. It's completely apparent. So when we start playing horse, this became even more clear that he only shot fundamentally sound jump shots from very stereotypical high percentage spots on the court. So those kind of games were fun because it allowed me to sort of become creative, and now I'm shooting all kinds of crazy layups and shots behind the backboards and shooting like runners off of the wrong foot and stuff like that. And doing that allowed me to throw him off his game because he's not used to shooting crazy, out of this world kind of nonsensical shots. And because of that, I was able to maintain a lead on him as well, because he was shooting fundamental kind of shots and layups and jumpers and stuff like that. And because they were fundamental, I was also able to make those shots as well. But then when I was busting out these crazy moves, he wasn't used to doing that. And so that pretty much led to an easy win for me against that guy. So I was able to be aware of him, be aware of his game, see what his strength was, go in the opposite direction, find his weakness, and then use that to be successful against him. So that's using court awareness to win horse games. It's important that you're always developing your court awareness and having it be second nature anytime you're out here. Anytime you're on the court with anybody, you want to be aware of who they are, how they play, what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, and being able to learn from that and use that to be successful in your own game. So thank you guys for watching. If you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Hit that notification bell so that you're notified of all my future videos. I don't know when I'm going to actually be out here with basketball in hand now that the weather is going to be completely frigid the next 5 months, but subscribe to the channel so that you're able to be aware of when I'm out here again, and I will see you guys next week.